The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Man from Lang. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, we are going to discuss the Feast of Hemlock Vale, the next investigator and campaign expansion for the Arkham Horror LCG. Designer Duke Harris unveiled the new expansions on Friday at Gen Con, and we are going to discuss them now. This is the first of 3 videos I'm planning to make about the new expansions. This one we'll talk a little bit about the Investigator expansion as well as the campaign expansion. Tuesday's video is going to focus on the Seeker Investigator in the box, Kate Winthrop, and some of the Seeker cards that were spoiled, while Wednesday's video will focus on Hank Sampson, the Survivor Investigator, as well as some of the Survivor cards that were spoiled. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Before we get started, I'd like to thank the patrons of this channel for their tremendous support. You all rock. If you'd like to be amazing like these people and support the channel's goals and see your name on this list, head over to patreon.com, sign up for a tier of your choice, and claim your rewards. That would be awesome. Special thanks to Cole Monroe Chitty, Nicole Fiscus, and Nate Lost in Time and Space for their contributions to the channel. I couldn't do it without you. Without further ado, let's get started. As I mentioned at the top of the video, designer Duke Harris unveiled the next Investigator and campaign expansions on Friday at Gen Con during a live stream, and it is going to be the Feast of Hemlock Vale. The campaign and Investigator expansions really seem to lean into themes that we've seen before with movies like The Wicker Man and Midsummer, where there is a town that is having some sort of strange festival, and the investigators visit said town, and hijinks ensue. So we are going to take a look at a little bit of the Investigator expansion, followed by the campaign expansion in this video, and then we are going to dig a little bit deeper into the Seeker Investigator, Kate Winthrop, on Tuesday, and the Survivor Investigator, Hank Sampson, on Wednesday. Both of them have some very interesting mechanics that they are working with, and I'm looking forward to bringing that discussion to you. Let's dive into what we know about the Investigator expansion. Surprise, surprise, we know all of the investigators that will be released in the Investigator expansion, which is going to be released in January. It has been almost a year since the Scarlet Keys dropped, and information about the next Investigator and campaign expansions has been few and far between since then, and we are going to have to wait a little bit longer to get our hands on the next Investigator expansion and campaign expansion. The Investigator expansion is slated to be released in January, while the campaign expansion will follow in February. That said, we do know all of the investigators who will be released in the Investigator expansion, and it features 2 new investigators that we haven't seen in Arkham Horror Files products before, which is nice. The Guardian Investigator is Wilson Richards, who has 3s across the board. The Handyman Wilson has been in many an Arkham Horror Files product over the years. He has the Drifter trait, and while his game text is obscured, it appears he has some way to reduce the cost of tool assets that he plays each round. He also receives skill bonuses when he uses said tool assets, and his Elder Sign effect looks like it allows him to swap a tool asset that is in his discard pile with one in his hand, and he has at least 8 health. Who knows what his sanity is? Probably, being a guardian, maybe 6. 6 sounds about right. We have Kate Winthrop, of course, the scientist. She has 2 willpower, 4 intellect, 2 combat, and 4 agility. Now, Kate Winthrop, of course, is the scientist. She has the Miskatonic and Scholar traits. Now, her game text is obscured in this picture, but it was released on the during the stream, as well as Fantasy Flight Games website. You begin the game with the Flux Stabilizer in active side face up. As a free triggered ability, Kate may move 1 clue from herself to a science or tool asset you control with no clues on it. She also has a forced effect when an asset you control with a clue on it leaves play, place its clues on your location, and her Elder Sign effect is +0. You may move one clue from an asset you control back to Kate Winthrop, and she has 6 health and 8 sanity. I'm not going to delve too deeply into Kate's deck right now. That will be the focus of Tuesday's video. There were a lot of Seeker cards spoiled during the stream, as well as on Fantasy Flight Games website. And Kate has some very interesting mechanics, moving clues between herself and her assets. And we're going to take a deep dive into that in tomorrow's video. The first new investigator that we are receiving is Alessandra Zorzi, the Countess. She has 3 willpower, 4 intellect, 2 combat, and 4 agility. She is the rogue investigator, of course. Alessandra does have 3 willpower, so she's not necessarily cursed by the rogue's low willpower. She has the drifter and socialite trait. You may take an additional action during your turn, which can only be used to parlay. Her Elder Sign effect is +2, and if you succeed, choose a non-elite enemy at your location or a revealed connecting location. Automatically evade that enemy. She has 7 health and 7 sanity. Now, free actions are always nice. Parlay actions, a lot of scenarios do have parlay actions in them. A surprising number, actually. It's not the most common action, but most campaigns force you to parlay at some point. So Alessandra can do that action without taking an action, which is nice. I can imagine in a scenario like The Last King, Alessandra is going to be an absolute powerhouse with all the parlaying that you do in that scenario. Perhaps she can also parlay with Ichtaka in the Forgotten Age. But as I said, parlay actions, you're not going to be doing this every turn, so you're not really going to be getting a ton of additional actions over the course of the game. But when you do need to parlay, at least Alessandra will give you a leg up there. Her 3 willpower is nice for a rogue, and of course 4 intellect. We love to see that. That means she's going to be very good at investigating, and 4 agility as well. So with a set of lockpicks, Alessandra is going to be an absolute powerhouse. Not much in the combat department, but that is what we would expect from somebody like the Countess. I should mention that while we know the front sides of most of the investigators, we do not know what their deck building options are. So that remains a mystery. Obviously, somebody like Kate probably has science and or tool assets in her deck building options. We would assume that given Wilson Richards' ability to play around with tools, he will also have something like that. But their deck building options remain to be seen. The Mystic Investigator is Kohaku Narukami, the Folklorist. He has 4 willpower, 4 intellect, 3 combat, and 1 agility, so he is no agility Agnes, that's for sure. Kohaku is the investigator of the bunch we know the least about. There is some information that he will bring balance to chaos in some way. But unfortunately, that's all we know. He has 4 willpower, which is, it's not the coveted 5 willpower that mystics, a lot of mystics like if they're going to be using spells. So perhaps he is another mystic who will not be going sort of down the traditional shriveling route. He does have 4 intellect, so he can actually discover clues without needing spells, which is pretty helpful. 3 combat, of course, will help him deal with enemies, and he's not going to be doing a whole lot of evading with 1 agility, and encounter cards that require agility skill tests are going to chew poor Kohaku Narukami up. So that will be something to look out for. So once we know a little bit more about Kohaku and his abilities and his deck building options, I'll be eager to talk about it. Mystic is one of my favorite classes, so I'm looking forward to seeing what he does. The final investigator is Hank Sampson, the farmhand. He has 3 willpower, 1 intellect, 5 combat, and 3 agility. the Assistant and Warden traits, you may be assigned damage and or horror dealt to ally assets or other investigators at your location. So he sort of has that Guardian ability that we've seen on a lot of Guardian cards. As a response, when you would be defeated by damage and or horror, instead heal all the damage and horror and swap this card with the bonded Resolute version, either side face up. His Elder Sign effect is a simple +1. He only has 5 health and 5 sanity, but he does sort of get a free death in a way, in that once he loses all his health and sanity, you heal him, and then you get to choose one of 2 options. You can choose his Warden bonded card or his Assistant bonded card, and those cards have different skill values and different abilities on them. So depending on how the campaign or the scenario is going, you can choose either version of Hank Sampson to help the team. We are going to dig very deep into Hank Sampson's abilities in Wednesday's video, so I'm not going to focus too much on it now. Overall, I'm very happy with this mix of investigators. It's nice to see a couple of new additions to the Arkham Horror Files lineup in Alessandro and Kohaku. Based on some of the other cards that I have seen in the set so far, it looks like parlaying is going to be very important. So obviously Alessandra is going to be in her element during this campaign, and I'd love to say more about Kohaku, but unfortunately we don't really know much about him. And of course, Wilson and Kate both emphasize the tool trait, and so we are going to be seeing a lot of tools, and we'll be taking a look at some of those cards that were spoiled in Tuesday and Wednesday's video. It's worth noting that this expansion is also going to include the typical wealth of player cards and deck building options that we've come to expect from these large investigator boxes. I'd expect 200 plus new player cards for players to dig into. The set will include bonded cards, which I believe were first introduced in the end of the Circle Undone or the beginning of the Dream Eaters. So that's a mechanic that we are accustomed to. The cards are also going to dig into cards that interact with a tool trait, which seems obvious given Wilson Richards' penchant for tools, as well as Kate Winthrop's abilities, which also deal with science and tool assets. The cards are also going to make use of Bless and Curse tokens. So we are going to be revisiting the Bless and Curse mechanic that was first introduced in the Innsmouth Conspiracy cycle. That I am really looking forward to some more news about. One of the chief complaints about the Bless and Curse mechanic during the Innsmouth Conspiracy cycle was that there just weren't really enough cards in some cases to really build out Bless and Curse decks in some circumstances. Some of the capstones for the Bless and Curse mechanic were a little bit weak. And personally, as a solo player, I found the Bless and Curse mechanic somewhat awkward. In multiplayer, of course, if you have multiple Bless and Curse decks at the table, it is very easy to fill the Chaos bag with Bless and Curse tokens. Not so much in solo, where you've got to do it all yourself, and it felt a little bit slow. You sort of had to try to fill up the bag with all these tokens, and then so you could trigger the cards that use those tokens, but sometimes it just felt like, well, why am I bothering with this mechanic when there are cards that do similar things and I don't have to fill the Chaos bag first? So personally, I'm hoping that they have found some way to speed up the Bless and Curse mechanic somehow for the solo format. Personally, I think they could do that maybe with some sort of permanent that starts the game in play, where you get to add a few tokens to the bag right off the bat to sort of kickstart your Bless and Curse deck. But I'm no designer. I'm sure Duke and Nick have come up with some inventive way of giving the Bless and Curse mechanic a boost in this expansion. I guess the other question is, if there weren't really enough Bless and Curse cards in the Innsmouth Conspiracy, will there be enough in this expansion for those players who, say, haven't picked up the Innsmouth Conspiracy expansion? So that there are some questions around the Bless and Curse mechanic, so we'll just have to wait and see as more spoilers come in the months to come, whether we will receive enough cards with the Bless and Curse mechanic to really either build a deck using just, say, the core set and the Feast of Hemlock Vale Investigator expansion, or whether you're going to actually have to go out and get the Innsmouth Conspiracy to really make a go of it. Finally, we've got the campaign expansion is going to go for $69.99, while the Investigator expansion is going to retail for $44.99, which is the same as what they cost for the Scarlet Keys. And as I mentioned, the Investigator expansion is slated for January, and the campaign expansion will follow in February. So hopefully there will be no delays, and we'll be able to get our hands on these cards sooner than later. There has been very little information released since the Scarlet Keys dropped nearly a year ago, so it's nice to see that we are finally getting another Investigator and campaign expansion for the game, and hopefully we won't have to wait so long for news of the next one. But expect there to be spoilers come out over the next, I guess it's going to be 6 months before 5 or 6 months before the Investigator expansion drops. And I'm sure many members of the community will be receiving spoilers, so stay tuned for that. And we'll see how this Investigator expansion develops, especially with things like the Bless and Curse mechanic. As for the campaign expansion itself, it is set in a town near Arkham. We have the renowned biologist, or botanist, I should say, Dr. Rosa Marquez, who receives a strange sample from the secluded and mysterious Hemlock Isle. Her instincts tell her that something is amiss. Following the recommendation of an old colleague, Dr. Marquez invites our investigators to accompany her on a survey of the island. The residents of the island are having a festival. More on those residents in a moment. And trouble ensues, as you might expect. The name Hemlock Isle, of course, is foreboding in its own right, hemlock being a very poisonous plant. I believe there was one of those Greek philosophers who drank a concoction of hemlock to kill themselves. So it's probably not going to be a good place for the investigators to hang out. Maybe poison makes a recurrence after the Forgotten Age. Who knows? Taking a look at Rosa Marquez, of course, we do get an ally card for her that you will be able to join the party at some point during the campaign. She's a 4-cost asset with an intellect, agility, and wild skill icon. So if you need to commit her, you can get 2 intellect, 2 agility, or one or the other. She's got the ally Miskatonic and Wayfarer trait. While you control Dr. Rosa Marquez, you get +1 intellect and +1 agility. This is very nice bonuses for Kate and Alessandra in particular. It boosts both of them to 5 intellect and 5 agility. So if you're playing in multiplayer and you have the choice of somebody getting Rosa, I would suspect that either Kate or Alessandra will lay claim to her. And as a reaction, after you discover the last clue at your location, there are some unusual symbols that we have not seen before on cards. Now, I don't know the meaning of these unusual symbols, and Rosa is not the only card that these symbols appear on. So they may relate to the other mechanic that will be running throughout this campaign that we will take a look at in a moment. But as of yet, what those symbols mean is a mystery. Perhaps more information will be released about them as we get closer to the campaign expansion dropping. Her flavor text is, "If it's survival of the fittest, I intend to survive." She, of course, takes up an ally slot, and she has 2 health and 2 sanity. So she can take a hit if there's ally hate around. She's not going to fold to a point of damage, which is nice. And so her bonuses will stick around. But what happens after you discover the last clue at her location is a very intriguing mystery. It may have something to do with the other main mechanic in this campaign, and that is the day-night cycle. The story will be taking place over 3 days and 3 nights, and your party must decide what to investigate on each of those days and nights. So we know that the campaign will be 6 scenarios long. However, the designers mentioned that there are more areas that is in the scenario than you will have time to survey during your stay on the island, and the events of the story will change depending on which scenarios you choose to play and whether you choose to play them during the day or during the night. So there could be 8-10 different scenarios to choose from during the campaign, but you'll only be able to play 6 of those, and you'll have to choose whether to play those scenarios during the day or during the night. So we have some beautiful art here showing, now I'm not sure whether these are cards that will be included in the campaign. Presumably there will be cards for all of the days and nights. But we have day 1 here, in which we welcome new friends to Hemlock Vale. We can see the people greeting the investigators. And then we have night 1, in which the forest comes alive with many creatures great and small. Now, during the live stream, designer Duke Harris mentioned that enemies, their abilities may change depending on whether you are facing them during the day or night. Presumably, enemies will get much more powerful if you encounter them at night, so that may make once you've had a chance to play the campaign a couple times, you may want to choose scenarios based on sort of that information. But this day-night cycle does create a lot of replayability for this campaign, which is nice to see. So looking forward to seeing a little bit more information about how this day-night cycle will interact with some of the other scenarios in the campaign. The designers are keeping that information very close to their chest for the time being. They didn't reveal any information, to my knowledge, about what you can expect to do in these scenarios. Probably besides going out with Rosa Marquez, the botanist, to investigate areas of the island to figure out why the flora is so unusual and possibly dangerous and or poisonous. So we will have to wait and see on that. Of course, the day-night cycle is not the only factor that will make this campaign very replayable. The designers have taken a cue from the Edge of the Earth and have introduced the residents of Hemlock Vale, with whom you can build relationships during the campaign. So much like the explorers in Edge of the Earth, you will be able to encounter these residents of Hemlock Vale, build relationships with them, and if your relationship is favorable with them, you may be able to they may join you on scenarios. You can do this, you may be called on to increase or decrease the residents' relationship level, so they will each have some sort of relationship level. So between scenarios, you may be asked to increase or decrease that relationship level, and that will change how those residents interact with you later during the campaign. Obviously, if your relationship with one of these residents is good enough, they may become your ally during certain scenarios. On the flip side, if you offend someone or fail to nurture your bond with them, they may end up trying to hinder you instead. Between the day-night cycle and how many residents do we have here? 9 different residents to play around with. That's going to create a lot of replayability for this particular campaign. So taking a look at some of these residents, we've got Theo Peters, the jack of all trades. Now, we don't see a whole lot of information about him because his card is obscured. We've got Simeon Atwood, the dedicated troublemaker. It looks like Simeon gives you +1 agility. And again, you will notice, looks like there is a skill test on Simeon, and if you succeed, there is the strange symbol next to him. Now, maybe that is related to the relationship level. Maybe if you succeed on a test, you increase your relationship level with Simeon by 3. Again, we don't know what those symbols mean. We've got River Hawthorne, big in New York. She gives you +1 willpower, and she has a test on her that is either willpower or intellect 3, and if you succeed, presumably there are more strange symbols. We've got Mother Rachel, the kindly matron. She is completely obscured. We've got Leia Atwood, the Vale cook, who is completely obscured. We've got Judith Park. Now the text is a little fuzzy, but I think she's the muscle. And it says, when you control Judith Park, you may action during your turn. So maybe she gives you an extra action. You can spend X resources to parlay with her. So of course that's right up Alessandra's alley. And again, there's the strange symbols. It looks like a book with a 7 beside it. So I'm not too sure what that means. And she has, Judith has 3 health. We've got Gideon Mizra, the seasoned sailor, perhaps a relative of Gavriela Mizra from the Circle Undone, one of the poor souls who you play during the prelude scenario at the beginning of that campaign. I think this is using the old Call of Cthulhu LCG art for Basil Elton, the lighthouse keeper. But here we've got a seasoned sailor. While you control Gideon Mizra, you get 1 additional accessory slot, and you can take a double action to parlay, and then it has that strange symbol 6. So maybe that does have something to do with the relationship level with Gideon, in which case the symbol we saw on Rosa Marquez would also have to do with the relationship level. So possibly. Now, he does have a forced effect after Gideon Mizra is probably defeated, set aside out of play, and in your campaign log, do something with his relationship level. So much like some of the explorers we saw in Edge of the Earth, these poor residents can die during scenarios, and if they die, it looks like they get put out of play, and then your relationship will deteriorate with them, which is no surprise if you end up killing the residents of the town. They're probably not going to like you very much, but Gideon only has 1 health, so chances are he could die pretty easily if there is any ally hate that, pings him for a damage. He's going to go down pretty quickly. It looks like he has 3 sanity, so a little bit of sanity soak there, but pretty vulnerable otherwise. We also have Bertie Musgrave, a true aesthete, ally Miskatonic, and assistant trait. While you control Bertie, you get +1 health and +1 sanity. As a free triggered ability, take either 1 damage or 1 horror and exhaust Bertie to parlay, draw 1 card. And again, he has these strange symbols, some Greek letters in there as well. Again, another parlay action for Alessandra Zorzi. So she should be very much in her element in this campaign. And he has a forced effect after Bertie Musgrave is defeated. Set him aside out of play. Doesn't say to do anything with his relationship level, however. Bertie has 2 health and 1 sanity. So again, vulnerable to ally hate. If he happens to just take 1 horror, he's down for the count. So you're going to want to probably protect these residents with your life. And finally, we've got William Hemlock. I think it says aspiring poet. And while you've got him, you get +1 intellect, which is always nice. And again, he has a test that if you succeed, you have the weird symbols. And if he's defeated, you're going to be setting him aside. And then in your campaign log, you're going to be recording some sort of change to his relationship levels. So it looks like several of these residents, depending on how they, whether they survive a scenario or not, their relationship level will change. During scenarios, you may have some way of affecting their relationship level, depending on what these symbols mean. But we will have to wait and see how these residents play into the campaign, and whether investigators will be somewhat affectionate toward them and want to protect them, or whether players will just sacrifice them willy-nilly to save their own skins, depending on the scenario. So overall, there is several mechanics that are operating in this campaign to increase its replayability between the day-night cycle and the residents. You can probably play this campaign several times over and have a different result each time. So that's going to do it for my preview of the Investigator and campaign expansions for the Feast of Hemlock Vale. This information has been a long time coming, and it's very exciting to find out what the next Investigator expansion and campaign expansion will be. I like the look of the Investigators so far. I think it's worth noting that the information we've seen so far doesn't include any information about new mechanics, like we saw with Customizable that was released during the Scarlet Keys Investigator expansion. I know I was a little frustrated when they dropped information about the customizable keyword, but didn't provide any information about it, which just led to a lot of rampant speculation about what that mechanic actually did. And I believe it was like a week later. I'm not sure whether the designers bowed to pressure from the community, but it was like, okay, we'll tell you what this mechanic does. But it looks like this expansion is going to be revisiting some older mechanics, such as the bonded cards and the, of course, the Bless and Curse mechanic, which hopefully will get fleshed out. As for the campaign itself, it does have vibes of movies like The Wicker Man and Midsummer. I saw Wicker Man many, many years ago. I have not seen Midsummer, but it's not, I don't think the theme is the one that I was particularly interested in or looking forward to, but I'm sure the designers will do a bang-up job on fleshing out both the Isle of Hemlock Vale and the festival that is taking place while the investigators are exploring the island and trying to determine what is going on with the flora there. The designers have not been shy about exploring themes beyond sort of traditional Lovecraftian themes. Like, we haven't really seen Cthulhu as a main enemy. We haven't seen sort of Shub-Niggurath as a main enemy, although given that the flora is unusual on this island, Shub-Niggurath seems like the great old one that would be involved here. I'm hoping the designers will eventually revisit those. So we can see, sort of play through and face Cthulhu at some point. But for the time being, we are going to be off to Hemlock Vale and exploring that island. And I look forward to bringing you more information about it in the weeks and months to come. Just a reminder that on Tuesday's video, we're going to take a deep dive into Kate Winthrop, who was spoiled both on the stream as well as the Fantasy Flight page. And then Wednesday's video, we'll take a look at Hank Sampson and some of the other Survivor cards that were spoiled. So I hope you'll stay tuned for that. Thanks very much for joining me, and I'll see you tomorrow. That's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoyed what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromlang@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromlang. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.